From the city of brotherly love, this is Shark Bite Biz with David Strausser.
You just arrived to the newest episode of Shark Bite Biz. I'm your rock star wannabe host, David Strausser, and this is your place to learn how to grow a business during complete global chaos. Today, all about that nuance discussion. First, though, please remember, download the Shark Bite Biz app exclusively on Android at the Google Play Store. All you got to do is search Shark Bite Biz. That's where you'll get every single episode of this show, the live stream, the audio version, the video version, the clips, everything right there in the app. In fact, you can buy our fabulous coffee brand, Dead House Coffee, right there in the app. All you got to do is hit the coffee store tab, bing, bang, boom, buy your coffee right there. But if buying coffee through an app isn't your thing, don't worry, we got your back. You can head on over to deadhousecoffee.com. Make sure you use the code SHARK. You'll save 20% off of your order. And then we'll get all the proceeds and keep doing all the magic that we're doing here at Shark Bite Biz. Now let's get back to today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about a new tech company that is helping you make educated guesses on how to buy eco-friendly products, How eco-friendly are your purchases? One thing I learned during this interview that plastic straw versus metal straw, unless you're going to use a metal straw 100 times, okay, it's the equivalent of using 100 separate plastic straws. It is crazy, some of the data that's coming out of this conversation, and I think you're going to love it. It's just one of those fun, really nuanced discussions that go deeper than what our average show does. So, who do we have today? None other than Miss Lizzie Horvitz. Lizzie started Finch to decode products' environmental footprint and encourage consumers to make better purchasing decisions. She became frustrated with greenwashing and the lack of knowledge outside of academia about the impact everyday products actually had. So, hey, without further delay, let's bring Lizzie right on in here.
Creative and innovation tips.
Lizzie, welcome to Shark Bite Biz. You, my friend, you just became Shark Bait.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy that you are here. So that's a good place to start, I guess. The first thing that we have to do, and we have to get this out of the way, because every single show we ask everybody the same exact question. Where are you from? Who are you? What do you do? How did you start doing it? Tell us, what makes Lizzie Lizzie?
I am originally from just outside Cleveland, Ohio. So born and raised Midwest. I went to school on the East Coast. But in high school, I had an experience where I was able to live off the grid in the Bahamas. And so I lived in a place that ran only on solar power, wind generators. If it didn't rain, we weren't allowed to shower. And so that was really my insight into climate change for the very first time. And really, since I was 16, I've been dedicating my life towards that. And so during college, I studied environmental history. I think it's really important to know sort of where we came from to figure out how to move forward. And then went into the private sector and have been really trying to solve climate change through large companies since then.
That sounds amazing. And it's kind of similar, because I have a story that I would say would be pretty similar to what you're talking about. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. Wasn't exactly as off the grid as you were, but I was living down in Tijuana, Mexico, in one of the more undeveloped sections of the city. So I wasn't in downtown. It was like camping 24/7. I mean, you'd have, we had one spigot. We had, maybe just 2 or 3 outlets. We would have to heat up boiling water, mix it with cold water in order to take a bath standing up. I mean, we had all those experiences. And for an American, especially being a white guy living down in Mexico for 15 years, it's almost like, why did you put yourself through that? It was that hard. And I was living in Tijuana, crossing the border into San Diego every single day for work, which some days that means that you're working an 8-hour shift. I was spending maybe 16 hours with my commute. It was insane. And it really helped me develop as an individual, as a person, to see things, especially when you get into things like the border crisis or immigration, those types of things, being through the immigration systems of Mexico and Peru and doing all that type of stuff. It gives me a little bit more insight than many of the talking heads that you'll see on TV that talk about those subjects. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel where you're coming from as far as having an experience like that, giving you a strong foundation to build your life.
Definitely. It just gives you so much perspective. I have been, my parents are still living in the house that I grew up in. They've been there for 38 years. And until I was 16, I was in this little bubble in Cleveland, and to live in a completely different place with different standards of living and, having to think about where your water is coming from and what happens when you keep the lights on or forget to turn them off, et cetera. That just changed my whole perspective on everything.
Yeah, that definitely it would. I mean, it does sound. Usually, when I tell these stories, I'm the person who's had the more extreme experience, and the other person, because there's a lot of people that say, "Hey, I traveled to Africa, or I did this in Asia, or I did this here or there," and it had a huge, or even South America, and it had a huge impact on my life. Just seeing how real people lived outside the state. Usually, their story doesn't go as deep as my story does. I have to say, out of the 170 plus episodes we have on this show, your story probably tops mine as far as being more immersed, because you were literally off the grid even more than I was.
Well, I'm honored. I'm very honored to be that person. And then 5 years later, I actually did live in Tanzania. I was studying wildlife ecology and conservation, and talk about being immersed. I was living in a Maasai community. In Maasai is a tribe in Tanzania and Kenya, mostly around East Africa, and they don't speak Swahili. They don't speak English. They have their own Maasai language, and they live in these mud huts. They live a very simple but beautiful life.
So I think the author was John Warden, if I remember correctly, but he has one of those, what's it called? Like the learning experience. I forget. You can get them on Audible. It's pretty much like a whole college course of all the lectures condensed into a book. And it's like a 40 plus hour book. And it's just guys' lectures on language and the history of languages. And one of the things that surprised me that I really wasn't culturally aware of is that there's a lot of, I guess, tribes out there in places like Africa where they do a lot of the clicking and stuff like that to communicate. Did you happen to see that at all? Was that how that tribe was?
No, that's more, I think, Southern and Western Africa. In Tanzania and Kenya, there's not, they speak language. And I learned Swahili, which is a fantastic, actually very easy language to learn, shockingly. And most of the country speaks that. But the Maasai have always sort of done their own thing, and they speak a completely different language. And so for 3 days, you have to figure out a way to communicate with your hands and gestures and facial expressions. And it was very cool.
So, I mean, if you don't mind, because I mean, obviously, I want to talk about your greater mission at hand here, but this is this is something that is I find it intriguing and very interesting. Having that experience of being, I guess you could say, embedded, living with a tribe in Tanzania. I mean, how did that actually happen? How did that come apart? Like, or fall together?
It happened because, for maybe not the reasons you might think, I was at a college that took languages extremely seriously. And if you they offered many languages, and if you were not fluent in a language that they offered, you were not allowed to study abroad. So in other words, I wasn't able to go to Italy, France, Spain, the more normal places that you go, because I wasn't fluent in those languages. The caveat was that they didn't offer Swahili as a language, and so I was able to go to Tanzania. I was also studying environmental studies, and so it was a natural move to go somewhere and study art history didn't make a lot of sense. And so there was a program that was wildlife ecology and conservation in Tanzania, where you essentially you live in the national parks for most of it. You're literally camping or in these homestays and studying wildlife and evolution and everything. It was really life-changing, but it was sort of, I mean, I'm such a fan of East Africa. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world, but it was almost by default. I knew I wanted to leave the country for a period of time. And that was one of the only places I was able to go.
Wow. So, it was kind of by happenstance, I guess you could say, but it sounded like it worked out for you. I got lucky because of living in Mexico for so long. I ended up, learning Spanish naturally from living there. Even in my house today, outside of work, we primarily speak in Spanish in our house just because, we want our kids to understand their culture. They have aunts, uncles, cousins that live down in Peru, for example, and they need to be able to communicate with them. So we speak Spanish fluently, so that way they learn how to speak it to speak with the other half of their family. And, that's still got to be a culture shock because, when you come to a place like the US, you got the melting pot, that people call us of what we are. But Spanish, especially because so much of the US used to, be part of Mexico at one point, there's a lot of Mexican slash Spain or Spanish influence in a lot of the areas. You get down Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, places like that. So I think going down there maybe wasn't as much as a culture shock as it would have been to live with a tribe out there in Tanzania. How did they receive you? Were they just open arms, like, hey, welcome, join us? Or
I think they did have open arms. I think, the whole history of colonizing this entire continent, and it's a really dark history, and these countries in Africa, at least in Tanzania, are relatively new, right, compared to certainly Europe, but even the United States, which is also pretty new. And so they, as a whole, I think a lot of the local people there who have...
People forget that. I want to make a point. People forget that. We're 246 years old. I forget the number, 224, something like that. And I know 1776, but I forget the actual math, how old the country is. But it's, somewhere in that range. But in terms of speaking of countries, that is still relatively young because you have countries that have been in one shape or form around for hundreds or even thousands of years. When you start talking about Spain, England or Germany, even though they've had some division, or Asian countries like China. So we are a really young country when you think about it.
Exactly. And I think Tanzania specifically is even younger. I think it became independent in the 60s. I don't remember the exact day or year, but so the relationship is still, America comes in and is aid, right? They come in and they offer mosquito nets and give money and bring school supplies for kids. And it's a very much like, I think in America, money grows on trees. And so the only Americans you're seeing in Tanzania are the ones who are giving something to them. And exactly. And so that created for me specifically, and everybody has different experiences, of course, a discomfort that was fine and really important for me to experience. But it was kind of like, can you take me back to America? Can you give me money? Can you teach me English? Can take. Which
I've had that I don't talk about this very often. In fact, I've never said this on the podcast. And you got to remember, I say this from my heart. I love Mexico. I have a Mexican green card. My oldest son is Mexican. So I say this with the best of intent, but I did have a lot of that experience down there in Mexico as well too, because they see the white guy, the gringo, and it's like, oh, you have money, you can give us money, you can help us. Can you give us a letter to get a visa? And it's like, dude, sorry, it actually doesn't work that way, and in fact, I live in Mexico for a reason. So, and
Yeah, and you get it because that's what they're used to. And it's also like I'm on their turf, I'm eating their food, they're serving me. So like I couldn't just it's a balance. But I also, on the flip side, I made incredible friendships. I had a translator there when I did my independent study, who her name was Tatu. She was, I don't even know how old she was at the time, but a little bit older than I was. And we became such good friends. We'd go dancing at night together. Like there's a really amazing core set of values that I think humans have, regardless of where they grew up, where you can sort of like bond with anybody on the planet. And that's also the experience that I had too. Like it's not, they care about the same things. They're not so different.
when I was younger, I was more, I don't want to say gullible, but I was more like, oh, you need 10 pesos for this or whatever. Okay, here you go, 10 pesos. And I'd be given money left and right because I was, coming from a small town in Pennsylvania and then being down in Tijuana, which Tijuana is a city of millions of people. It's one of the largest cities on the whole West Coast of North and South America. And, people really don't understand how big that city is. And going to there and having, I guess, the big city culture shock compared to cultural shock of being in Mexico was different for me as well, too. And I was giving money away left and right. And as I got older, I guess you could say I got colder in a way. I would stop giving. By that point, I had kids, I had a family, and I needed to make sure they were being taken care of first. But if there were kids, for example, that were, I wouldn't give them money, but I would end up, hey, here's some candies. You know what I mean? Because it's evil. I think some of the beggars down there, they basically grab orphan kids and make them do their bidding because they figure that the kids will get the money easier asking for money than the adults will. So instead, I'll give the kids candy. I'll give the kids cake or something like that. Like literally, I'll buy them tres leches slices of cake down there, give them that, and let them have that because I would rather see them eat something or enjoy something than just give them money that is going to someone else. But anyways, let's pivot. We've been talking a lot about our paths, which it's been really interesting how they compare. But you are the founder and CEO of Finch. Why don't you tell us what Finch is?
Finch is a platform that decodes products' environmental footprints to help consumers make better purchasing decisions. And so this came out of a frustration that I had where, because of my background, I had a lot of family and friends coming to me with questions around, what sunscreen is not going to give me cancer and what deodorant is best that is made with aluminum, et cetera. And I really didn't know where to direct them. I felt like there were these academic papers that are tough to digest for a normal person. And then this rise of blogs, which are certainly well-intentioned, but they say things like all natural, chemical free, things that don't mean anything. And so our goal was really to create.
It sounds exactly like Dr. Oz's website.
Yeah, exactly. My goal was to create, if you're familiar with NerdWallet, it's this fantastic resource, right? Where if you have any questions around personal finance, that's your go-to. If you Google mortgage, NerdWallet's the first thing that comes up. I wanted to create that in sustainability because the numbers show that most people in the United States care and want to do something about climate change with their own impact, but they don't even know where to begin. And a lot of them become, apathetic because they don't have more than 7 minutes to research any of this online. And so if there's an easy way to sort of get this information, more people can make more responsible decisions.
Definitely. And I think, again, most people would want to do something that is better for the planet because, I mean, look, okay, no matter how far right or how far left you are on the spectrum, I mean, we're only going to be able to do so many landfills in the world that, with the size of human population, I mean, like we have to figure out a solution as far as like consumable items go, plastic stuff that don't degrade. Not that I'm against plastics itself. I very much despise paper straws. I rather have a plastic straw, but maybe there's some type of better plastic that can be either easier recycled or perhaps more degradable to where it's a little bit more natural or something like that. And I've even listened to what was it? It was a Joe Rogan podcast where he had this sweet old lady on the show, like very elderly, and she was talking about the study about how much plastics are in the human system. Like basically, it's almost like a credit card size worth of plastic that's in your body, in your blood, and it actually can't believe I want to say this on this show, but it actually relates to, I guess you could say, male fertility as well too. That the studies have shown that since plastics have come out and been more dominant, the smaller things have been for males. I guess that's the most PC way to put that. How much of that are you familiar with, and how does that all kind of fit together? Because I think plastics, they're good, but they're also bad.
Right. I mean, there's so much to say on this topic. I think our biggest enemy is convenience, right? People love holding on to something for 12 minutes and then throwing it away and not having to think about what happens next. Same thing with Amazon Prime in a different way. Like the carbon footprint of shopping online is the rush delivery. It's not the act of buying something from a manufacturing site. With straws specifically, I think, first of all, it's so interesting that has become such a sort of pariah. Like everybody's talking about plastic straws, and there's definitely it's a worthwhile cause, but there's so many other things that are more important. And so,
what about reusable plastic bags? Would you view that as more important or less important than plastic straws?
I would say it's similar. And we did a really interesting study almost a year ago, probably at this point, which is called the sustainability paradox, that really compares how bad is a plastic straw versus a metal straw, plastic bag versus a canvas bag, et cetera. And generally what we learned is that if you actually reuse this bag, this straw, fill in the blank, it's great, right? You need to use it.
That's what my point was going to be. Like my problem is that, so like we went out to New Jersey for vacation, and I also used to live in California when bags first became illegal out there. But when we were in New Jersey, it gave us nightmares of how California was, because I'd be carrying all this stuff because the law just went into, some of the stores, in their defense, the law just went into place and they didn't have alternative bags at that moment yet. It was like 2 or 3 weeks after the law went in place, and they couldn't give us, the single-use plastic bags. But, I'm thinking, like, when has a single-use plastic bag in our household, and I think this is true for many families too, that when has a single-use plastic bag only been used a single time? Most of those bags end up being reused as far as trash bags, stuff like that. Now, to fill our little bathroom trash can, guess what? I'm buying a bigger, thicker plastic bag to put a way less portion, like it's a huge bag, and we're putting this much garbage that a single-use bag could have filled up with. So it's actually making us use more plastic if you think about it.
Yep, absolutely. Sustainability is so holistic. And so one issue is plastic, for 2 reasons that I care about. The first is that it comes from petroleum, right? And so you're sort of supporting the fossil fuel industry every single time you use plastic. And the second is that it ends up in the oceans, right? And it's polluting our planet. Nobody likes to see turtles with a straw in its nose. But there's also climate change, right? There's biodiversity loss, there's human health impacts. And so when you think of climate change, for example, a metal straw has probably worse implications for climate change than a plastic straw does. And so if you buy a metal straw, that's great. But if you only use it less than 100 times, you might as well have used 100 plastic straws.
That's where I find what you're doing is so interesting, because so many people, and I don't want to blow anybody up specifically, but so many people are in a, like a pigeonhole, for example. It's, oh, all plastic bags are bad. They don't look at the nuance of the subject, and they don't bring up like the study that you're bringing up, to where you've got to use a metal straw 100 times, or else, the actual impact is, 100 plastic straws, same thing. And I think that's part of what's missing in this greater conversation that we're having. And to a certain extent, I think that's also with the electric cars, because a lot of places, for example, I mean, look how they get their energy. It's not green energy that's bringing the electricity to charge up the electric cars. I mean, how let's get into that subject, because I think that's very interesting as well, too, as far as the electric car. I don't know if it's a dilemma, but I mean, Rogan said it on his podcast. A lot of other people have said it. You're in certain states. I mean, they still have coal plants firing up, or they're still using some other type of fossil fuel for energy production that's bringing that electricity. So, maybe it's using that electricity more efficiently than gasoline would, but you're still, it's not like you're 100% green. Is that accurate?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the bottom line is that every single physical thing has some sort of downside, right? From an environmental standpoint. I think from electric cars, we did a lot of research on that too. And we found that, in West Virginia and I believe Wyoming, those are two states where oftentimes it doesn't pay off because there's such a huge coal mix, to your point. But in all other 48 states, 100%, it's still better. And so I think sometimes we, and I obviously am so in this because we're always looking at the details, but sometimes as a community, I think we get too caught up in sort of, well, did you know how bad solar panels are, how much energy they take to make? It's like, yeah, of course. But overall, they're still significantly better.
Isn't there other problems? Okay, so again, I'm just I'm not taking one side or the other. I just want to be clear just to you and all the listeners out there. But I do, when a guest comes on and they're talking about things, I do try to challenge as far as asking questions and just making people think, so that way they don't think that you're just pie in the sky, everything's all good, So one argument I've heard with the solar panels and with windmills is that they actually cause more damage to the areas of where they're located. I guess with the solar panels, I believe it might be because of things like, it's generating so much heat in that area. I think it is, or there's a couple different reasons, with windmills, it's because of, I guess, not always being consistent with wind coming through and wind patterns and birds and stuff like that. I mean, how much of that is actually FUD? How much of that is actually true?
I think for the most part, there's a glimmer of truth in all those things, right? Windmills, if they're, particularly offshore windmills, can mess up the ecosystems and the ocean ecosystems. They really don't kill that many birds, certainly not as many birds as climate change is killing. And so with solar panels, I've honestly never heard that they generate too much heat or can be dangerous or have those issues.
I suggest you look that up, because I can swear, legit news sites, I've seen some of the contradictions in solar power being something around that sort. I'll Google up an article and throw it in the description as kind of proof that I'm not talking out my butt.
Really, it's like healthy dialogue, obviously, to be having. I think generally what I've experienced is that those types of arguments are really good excuses for people who are embedded in the fossil fuel industries to explain why we can't get off of oil and gas. And the fact is, if we build enough solar panels, if we build enough wind, there's plenty of wind to power. I mean, entire countries in Europe are run on wind. And so that's definitely something that has legitimacy. Can we switch to complete renewable tomorrow? Of course not. And, I recognize that
we need the batteries. Batteries is the hurdle.
I also think this is unpopular among environmentalists, but I think micro nuclear plants are really promising. I think.
Okay. So that's my very next question. I was going to be asking you is, well, maybe not micro plants. I want to hear about that because I've not heard of the micro plant philosophy, but we've had green energy, which does have some negative side effects. But in the history of the world, there's only been 2 major accidents and, 3 Mile Island that almost was an accident, so only 3 incidents in 60, 70 years. Why aren't we investing more in nuclear energy? And that, to me, it is what makes me a little bit suspicious as far as some motives like, solar panels. Well, that's because they want to sell solar panels, or the windmill companies want to sell windmill. We have the technology for nuclear energy. It's very effective. It's very cost effective. Yes, there's a waste problem. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe we get Elon to ship it up to space, and then don't have to worry about it. Sitting there, just blast it right into the sun. That's what I view.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wish the solar panel and wind generator companies were powerful enough to have lobbies to do that. I have to say, I don't think most people who are advocating for that are in bed, so to speak, like the fossil fuel are. I think with nuclear,
that's just one of the criticisms that I heard. So that's why I'm glad that you've addressed it, because I play both sides of the aisles. I'm very down the middle. And
you're right. I mean, the technology's there. I think for geopolitical reasons that are way beyond my pay grade, there's some danger in terms of nuclear arms and warfare that we have to be aware of.
But we already have nuclear plants out there. That's why yes, I understand what you're saying about the nuclear risk, but we already have existing nuclear plants, and a lot of other countries have existing nuclear energy plants. So I don't know if I would personally buy that explanation as far as potential, the potential use of turning the waste or whatever into like a WMD or something like that.
I think it's just, I think more, it's just, that's one of the uphill battles. It's just a struggle to, it's not to say that that's a reason not to do it. It's just, that's why a lot of these nuclear plants have not been built in a long time. They're a little bit older. And so I think that's one reason. And then, yeah, I mean, I think like Chernobyl, Fukushima, those types of situations were massive, massive operations. And so the value of these micro plants is that they're smaller, they're more localized. And so if, God forbid, something were to happen, it had the potential to be a little bit more contained. And I think that is a promising future. I'm now out of my scope a little bit. I'm not an energy.
No, that's fine. That's fine. The discussion itself is incredible and amazing. And I love these topics. And I did just Google, believe it or not, it says that according to EIA.gov, the newest reactor to enter service is Tennessee's Watts Bar Unit 2, which began operation in 2016. So you have to think, it's been 6 years since we have had a nuclear plant go online. But when you get into energy stuff like that, I mean, you also have different technologies as far as potentially fusion. You have graphene, which is up and coming. And I think, to me, and again, I'm not an expert on energy, climate, any of that stuff. But I think energy plays into your bigger discussion here that we're going to get into in a second with climate change. But I think that there are alternative options as far as, again, nuclear, maybe those micro plants, different few types of fusion plants, different types of, graphene, and what that potential could potentially offer us in the future. I think that there's going to be other more stable options. I just, will we do it? Will we assume the risk, and how can we do it in a safe manner?
Definitely. Yep. I agree.
So now the big topic that you're really an expert on, I believe, is going to be climate change and how all this stuff has been affecting us. Like you talk about the conservation, the environmental impacts of consumer products. How much do you think that, again, back to the plastic straws, back to the plastic bags, everybody's seen the picture that's like a size of an island out there in the ocean of just accumulated plastic, which is horrible. Okay. That is disgusting. And as humans, we should be embarrassed of that. Okay. But how much of an impact do you think that all these consumer goods have had on climate change as a whole?
That's a really good question. I think as a whole, it's not huge, right? It's less than 10% probably. The thing about climate change is that there's not a silver bullet, right? If we turned all of our energy to nuclear tomorrow, we would still have a long way to go in other areas. And so I think we want to make sure that we're sort of tackling it in all different ways. And for me, it's a combination of, if you make different decisions, we can make a really big impact. And my main goal is, let's get to a place where consumers demand this from businesses and businesses are forced to change their practices, right? Because I think right now businesses just don't have the business case for it, right? Virgin plastic is cheap, so there's not an incentive really to switch. But once consumers start getting the information saying, I'm actually not going to buy this anymore, that's when, the dollars start changing and businesses are interested in shifting.
Well, ultimately, consumers, they hold control over every company because of, money, because of dollars. I mean, if you look, people who get canceled or lose sponsors or whatever, it's because their customers are saying, hey, we're not going to support you anymore if you don't do this. So I think consumers have a lot more power than they may even realize in most cases.
I completely agree. And I think that, the more we can empower them in that way, I think before this phase of voting with your dollar, really the only thing consumers could do was vote every 2 years, right? And even if we want to switch to microgrids and do all this fun stuff, the average individual doesn't really have power over that, right? Unless they make it their career. But everybody does have to buy toilet paper and shampoo, right? And so that is a way that we can really encourage consumers
Purple ply toilet paper.
Exactly, to feel like they're being a part of the change. And there's this gap where 70%, nearly 70% of consumers want to make better decisions. Only 28%, 26% end up doing so. So that gap is really like, there's not enough time. I don't know where to begin. It's too expensive. All of these.
You hear 2030 a lot coming from one side of the political aisle. As I believe it's 2030. Maybe they've changed the date, but is climate change and where we're at, is it that serious of a thing? Is it more natural, just global cycles? Is it man-made climate change? I mean, there's a lot of different options, and that's one thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years. There's not many climate deniers that flat out denying that the climate is changing. It's more that they view that, yeah, it's changing, but it's more of a natural phenomenon than it is a human-made phenomenon. Where do you sit on that side of the aisle?
I have two responses to that. I think the first is, there's nothing natural about the time in which this is changing. You look at since the Industrial Revolution, and it's a very clear, once we had industry, this started going up significantly more. So I don't believe that it's a natural thing. But my other point is that even if it were natural, like cancer's natural, right? But we invest a lot in avoiding it. Imagine if we approach that as like, people are supposed to get breast cancer and die. It's just something that happens. That's never an argument. And so it doesn't really matter. I think we're in this like post phase of why is it happening? The fact is it is happening, and it's having horrible repercussions on not only the human community, but our entire ecosystem. And so if there are ways that we know it can be slowed down, I think that's a worthwhile cause.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that too. And that's, really some good counterpoints, for some of those arguments that are out there. So yeah, this has been a pretty good interview, I'd say. We've covered a lot of topics.
We've covered a lot. Yeah, this was
jam-packed. So I've got to ask you, your business out there, Finch, how can people find you? How can they find your business? How can they find more about the mission that you're carrying out?
So go to choosefinch.com and you can download our extension, which operates on Amazon. And so once you download that, whenever you're shopping on Amazon, you can see what products are more sustainable than others. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at ChooseFinch. And, I love talking to users. So if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, they should feel free.
And you love talking the Shark Bite biz, right?
I do, yes.
Hey, thank you so much. This was, again, such a far-reaching, interesting episode. I mean, we've talked about what some people will consider, controversial topics to some degree. And we did it humanely. And I think that is just proof that people can hold a conversation and can also understand nuance in this day and age if they allow themselves to.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Good luck in your mission. I will be downloading your extension today, and also the link will be down below in the description. Thank you again, Lizzie.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Yeah. Cheers. Oh, wow. That was such an incredible chat with Lizzie, right? I mean, really, it was just so amazing. Nuance. We got into details that, again, typically we don't talk about on this show, and to a level of nuance that it's just great having two people communicate and ask sincere questions and get real answers. It was pretty great. I'd classify this conversation as epic if you wanted my true opinion on it. First, though, you all know the routine. If you found this interview helpful, if it sparked those warm and fuzzies, do me a favor, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. But if you really want to help us out, because you know that Shark Bite Biz is the greatest kept secret in the world of small business, please share us out to your friends, your family, your colleagues, anywhere that you dwell on the interwebs, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Minds, anywhere you go. Help get the word out. Help carry out our mission of helping people achieve personal growth, professional growth, and most importantly with this show, small business growth. Now, let's get back to our rock star guest, Lizzie. First, I've got to say, I really love and am passionate about what Lizzie and I have in common, and that is our travel stories that kind of tie our paths together loosely. We both lived off the beaten path, and it made us who we are today. It really shaped both of our beliefs. Me, it went one direction. Her, it went into another direction, but it made us who we are. For each person, it really gives them something unique that comes out of that experience, and it affects everybody a different way. Living with a tribe in Tanzania, that's pretty gnarly. I've got to admit, I don't admit this much on the show, but yeah, I was definitely jealous of hearing that story. That is an experience that to me would be a once in a lifetime opportunity, and the impact that would have on my global view of how I feel that I fit into this world. I think it would totally shake the foundation of that even more than, me living down in Mexico. Hold on. Even more than me living down in Mexico or eventually down in Peru. So, yeah, I mean, it's really great. And like I said, that's a once in a lifetime experience. And for her, it really helps her, I think, in my opinion, helped her understand the fundamentals of life. Her mission, what she's doing with her business, it came directly from the experiences that she had. And it is an extremely important mission. I normally don't do this, but during the interview, I did bring up about the solar panels and some of the impacts that it does have on the ground. So I am going to link to a Washington Post article in the bottom, just to kind of show that I'm not talking out of my butt with that. But it was some, legit stuff about solar energy. And that's part of the region. And that's part of the reason why I ended up, in my mind, I'm a bigger fan of nuclear, or like Lizzie said, the micro nuclear plants. Now, that is a concept I never heard about before, but I'm blown away by that. I think we should be doing that. That is the easiest thing possible. Now, I know energy isn't, Lizzie's specialty. Her specialty is more around consumer goods, buying them, and the impacts of the planet. But as I said in the intro, I was blown away when she told me that one metal straw, the cost of energy to produce that, the negative effects on the environment for one metal straw is the same as drinking 100 plastic straws. That is a fact that, I'm still blown away by that. That is something that I will keep to heart. It doesn't mean that I'm one more way or the other, but I think making people understand the nuance of everything, and that things are not just as right or wrong as people like to say they are with these issues, is a big point. And that's kind of where I feel Finch fits in, because it gives you some of that reliable, credible data to help you make smart purchasing decisions. So awesome stuff, Lizzie. Thank you for coming on, sharing your mission. I think it is critical what you're doing. I think Finch, your company is amazing. It's really innovating, and I love that you're educating consumers and also promoting small businesses that are doing things the right way and helping people understand the nuance of their purchases and how it affects the environment. Please, like she said, go download the extension for your browser so that way you can check out and get more information about the products that you're about to buy. Question of the day: would an extension like Finch help guide your purchases? Are you going to listen to an extension? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm sure this is going to be a hot topic. Leave a comment down below on YouTube. Do you want to be on the show? Interviews at sharkbitebiz.com. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, join the channel for only $3 a month. You can become a baby shark, or head right on over to deadhousecoffee.com, where you can get the freshest coffee known on earth, coffee that is roasted, sealed, shipped, and delivered to your doorstep within a 24-hour period of roasting. Don't forget to use the code SHARK. You'll get 20% off of your order. All the proceeds help us continue doing all the magic that we're doing here with Shark Bite Biz. We're about to be kicking off our live stream with Odetta Pine in about a couple of weeks, sometime in mid-September, it looks like. We'll have details coming soon, so stay tuned. Y'all know this by now, but I'll say it again. I'm David Strausser. This is Shark Bite Biz. We'll see you all next episode. Ciao.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.